All right, we should be live. So good evening and welcome to another session of ShareIT. My name is Matteo, and today I'm going to briefly and soon pass the mic to Kandan, who is going to talk us about product ecosystems. But first, as usual, let me first introduce you what ShareIT is and the code of conduct of today. So ShareIT is an initiative sponsored and powered by ThoughtWorks, which is a global consultancy firm with offices across all the globe. In Italy specifically, we are based in Milan, even if many of us live outside Milan, but again, inside Italy. In ThoughtWorks, we put a lot of emphasis on learning, but also on teaching. That's why many of us have written several books throughout the years. Usually they are tech books, but we also wrote about product, UX, and many other topics. Coming quickly to ShareIT, ShareIT instead was something which was born here in Italy and specifically in Milan. The goal of this community is to share any relevant and meaningful knowledge and experience that we might get from our day-to-day job with the rest of the tech industry. Again, usually we talk about tech, but as for instance, today we also talk about product, user research, diversity and inclusion, and in general, anything which is dear to ThoughtWorks. Regarding instead the code of conduct, as usual, pretty simple. Just please be kind and respectful to each other. And if you want to share any relevant experience from, again, past job experience or your current job or anything you want to share about the topic of today, you can use the button down below which says chat. But instead, if you have any specific question directed towards Kandan, please, I would invite you to use another button, again, down below, which is Q&A. Every question that you write there is going to be public, and either me, Emil, or Ronnie, who are also helping me facilitate today, will read out these questions at the end of the presentation for Kandan. With that being said, I think without any further ado, I can pass the mic to you, Kandan, and yeah, I guess the stage is all yours.
Thank you, Matteo. Thank you everyone for joining today. Today, the topic is about product ecosystems, which is going to focus on the need for holistic product building in the current scenario. Let me just share my screen. Do let me know if you're able to see the screen and we can get started.
Yes, Kandan, we can see.
Okay. So product ecosystems technically can also be considered as a framework or approach for holistic product building as part of product evolution and growth. The need for product ecosystem is coming from the fact that we are looking at digital products primarily in the sense of only digital transactions. But if we abstract and start looking at it from the perspective of how your digital products are able to bring human interactions together, how they are able to bring peripheral actors together, how they are able to truly support the nature of phygital transactions that we do and interactions that we have on a day-to-day basis, ecosystems play a very important role. And what we've done as part of this particular presentation is explore a step-by-step approach of going about, uncovering the product ecosystem landscape. So there are three takeaways as part of today's session. And the goodie bag consists of A, B, C takeaways. First, we are going to be talking about the awareness, ecosystem awareness. Ecosystem awareness, we will talk through creation of empathy about product ecosystems, their existence, and why are they relevant right now in the current condition that we are in. The second one talks about ecosystem building. This is where we are exploring the framework and approaches that are used in terms of building product ecosystems from a truly, a physical nature of how we are building digital products. The third one talks about ecosystem caution. Ecosystem caution talks about the commonplace misconceptions and what we need to be avoiding in relation to thinking about ecosystems, because there are quite a number of myths about ecosystems, and we will be talking through some of them and clearing misconceptions around that. About me, I am a product manager with ThoughtWorks, and I have about 18 plus years of experience in the consulting and product space. I largely I'm very passionate about product building and building the products that are right, and ensuring that the right practices are followed in terms of product building. I'm very passionate about storytelling and articulation of business cases back to organizations and trying to discover and uncover value for these organizations. Moving on, we'll get started with ecosystem awareness. Product building generally focuses on viability, feasibility, and desirability. If we use the same three lenses in relation to product ecosystems, we can change those lenses as inclusion, impact, and correlation. Now, a product ecosystem consists of inclusion lens, which primarily focuses on the participants that are outside of the ecosystem. These are basically physical or digital entities that are generally peripheral actors to the ecosystems. And in an ecosystem building thought process, inclusion is very important, and these peripheral actors become a very important part of ecosystem building. The second lens would be impact. Impact talks about servicing end-to-end services journey for the client, which basically create lasting impact. And providing a very extended customer journey without too many hops, or providing a unified customer experience. And through that, creating an impact through using your product. This is primarily talking about building on top of your core capabilities of what your product can offer, but extending it to the entire life cycle of the customer. The third lens is correlation. Correlation talks about having mutual wins for partners. When we are building digital products, there could be one or few problems that we are solving, but the way the customer discovers the product, adopts the product, and evolves the product primarily talks about customers' engagement. Now, as part of product growth and product sustenance, we generally have to end up partnering with a bunch of extended support players, like, for example, payment or car, etc. Now, these are players that are generally partners that we onboard. And sometimes when we are building these products, they could be multiple hops. So correlation talks about how do we create partners who are mutual wins? How do we focus on the mutual wins of building this ecosystem and creating that correlation that provides a more unified journey for the customer, as also a mutual win for the partner that is partnering with you. Why is there a need for ecosystem, product ecosystem thinking and product ecosystem awareness right now? Today, we are in a very confused marketplace, if I may call it that. There's a lot of products that are coming, and there's a lot of choice in the market. And as consumers, we all often feel overwhelmed by the choices that are made available to us. One of the problems this has is it fragments the market. It makes the consumer basically shift between products. And basically, this choice often creates this scenario where the customer is only using a product for a part of the journey and then eventually moving away from the product. This is why maybe many of the startups are finding it hard to sell their products, or not many of the startups are turning into unicorns. Largely, these customers are looking for newer experiences and are shifting to newer, shinier toys. So why is it important that we talk about product ecosystem right now is, again, applied on three lenses or three pillars. Basically, the first one talks about bringing cognizance. There's a very heavy cognitive load on the customer, and cognizance, providing that cognizance as a product ensures that the product provider caters to all the peripheral needs of the customer and is able to sort of keep the customer's cognizance in place. The second one would be unifying experiences, ensuring that the customer has a seamless experience in terms of using the product when they are able to glide through their end-to-end journey. Ensuring that their lifetime value is maximized is very important. And inducing of the inclusivity factor. Now, there are many non-digital players who allow the customer to glide into a digital product. For example, if you're going to be purchasing a SIM card for your mobile, most probably that is going to be a physical interaction at a store. And the kind of interaction that you're going to be having with the person who's selling the product to you potentially influences your decision to engage with them either physically or digitally. Now, if you have a bad experience at the point of sale, you're not going to have a lot of trust with the product, even in a digital format. So how do we ensure that we are also bringing the non-digital participants as part of this whole ecosystem so that they are contributing to your product growth in general? Before we move on to further details, I just wanted to pause and talk about some of the examples that we have in terms of product ecosystem building. Primarily in today's experience economy, there's a need to transcend beyond the digital realm and understand what customers' behaviors and emotions are. The concept of an ecosystem looks beyond the whole fluidity of digital and physical. And the focus on human centricity and human behavior is becoming extremely important now. Because we are now no longer tapping into what the customer wants. We are now tapping into what the unmet needs, unstated, unsatiated needs of the end customer, and eventually building experience that they did not even think about or ask about in the first place. And this doesn't happen as an individual entity, or even if you're building a product for a particular core need, it would not happen only with the core need. So ecosystem building becomes very critical in relation to understanding the customer holistically and starting to offer services or offerings to the customer that gives them a more holistic view of what the product is going to do for them, even if it is solving one or two of their needs. So ecosystems are the way of existence going forward. Some of the examples that we can share here is there is a leading bank in Singapore that was trying to up their uptake on digital wallet. Now, the way they pivoted is tried creating the merging. Basically they started bringing in the convergence of a lifestyle app within their digital wallet app that allowed them to use the digital wallet for end-to-end transactions. So technically, they did not have to carry any kind of currency or card at any of the stores. Being able to amalgamate some of that made the life entirely easy. Not only that, it started expanding the bank's capability into a lifestyle app, e-commerce, food and beverage, and a bunch of other areas as well. There's a food ordering app in India that basically pivoted on their logistics, and we'll cover this a little later as well in this slide. That quickly pivoted during the COVID times to become a grocery supply chain provider and tying the local players together through a point-to-point pickup and drop service. There's a cinema chain in India that focused primarily on hygiene and food and beverage factors as a hook to draw customers. So the experience of watching cinema was more holistic for the customers, and their reason to be at the cinema to experience the movie was largely around the offerings that were surrounding the cinema watching experience. I'm picking some examples from the Indian context because that's my that's where I am from. Indian Railways, again, a government organization that largely focuses on selling of tickets. When they started creating their website, the only focus was to be able to sell tickets for railway tickets. Recently, the way they have pivoted is becoming the go-to segment for travel insurance, travel planning, booking of flights, booking of hotels, and basically end-to-end tour package. So if you are looking to travel across India, there's only one-stop shop that you need to get onto. And this is the government trying to actually extend the ecosystem play for all the customers and allowing them to experience an end-to-end journey rather than having to hop across multiple players. While we talk about all of this, there are 4 key drivers for product ecosystem. They would be human centricity, which is the primary driver, partnership synergy, which will be the secondary driver in relation to ecosystem building. There's also sharing it with all. Basically, how do we sort of unify the product and service offerings, and societal inclusion, which is largely talking about ethical product building. Now, these 4 factors come together to create what we call as a product ecosystem as 4 foundational or fundamental principles. As part of human centricity, we focus on customer journeys and end user journeys as one of the starting points for us. Most often what happens is, as part of product building, generally when we take an agile approach to it, we focus on a minimum viable product. In that process, we miss out on some of the aspects which are experience enhancers, which would be the quick wins and like the faster revenue conversion mechanisms. How do we also start humanizing these interactions? How do we move away from the fact that there is a digital touch point to a more phygital, the product talking to the customer and product being able to perceive the customer's emotions and being able to record the content. As part of partnership synergy, we are trying to essentially solve maybe one or two problems for the client, but we want the client to come back to the product and start using the product so that we can maximize the lifetime value. But how do we do that is primarily finding out partnerships that we can start pivoting on through maybe opportunity for local players as well. This involves aspects like integration with payment partners that are locally available, integration with service providers such as logistics providers, last mile providers who can deliver your product, or if you're in an e-commerce or a food and beverage situation, how do you start including elements and players that are contributing to the end-to-end service line. Sharing it with all primarily talks about bringing together product and service offerings. So you could have a core product and you could primarily have certain service offerings that are in the periphery of it. So how do you start unifying some of those is predominantly what this talks about. In addition to this, the whole sharing it with all talks about creating revenue models that serve ecosystem players well. This is largely a win-win situation. We don't want to create ecosystems that are cannibalizing other players. It's primarily about understanding what is the end-to-end value that we are creating for the customer while being a long-term sustenance partner for the customer, and also taking our partners along by creating revenue models that are bettering or benefiting the ecosystem players who are serving the customer journey. This in effect creates a lot of flywheel effects that can be leveraged for product growth. Societal inclusion primarily talks about considering peripheral actors. Largely the missed portion of it, we are talking about how to influence a customer, but we are also not talking about how do we influence the people who are directly interacting with these customers or causing a direct impact to these customers. This could be a service center person. It could be somebody who's on the call solving a customer support problem. How do they be contributors to the digital growth of the product is something that we might need to really be focusing on. So taking a very yin and yang approach to a phygital nature of product building will be very critical as part of ecosystem mapping. And incentivizing the channels outside of the digital realm if we are having agents who are selling products at cost, if they get a benefit by making the customer adopt to a digital channel, are they being incentivized in the process? This is something that we might definitely need to look into. Before we move on, there's a thought that I wanted to share, which is when we think of product ecosystems, it's quite natural to think that they are very similar to platforms. Instead, they are very similar to platforms, but they definitely extend beyond the realm of a platform as a service model. The innate nature of a product ecosystem is that it is completely human-centric, and it's more human-centric than system-centric, and it is a living, breathing, and thriving organism. There's a good portion of coverage that we've done about ecosystem awareness. So we are now aware of what a product ecosystem is, but we'll now step into what product ecosystem building is all about. This is primarily what we've learned through our engagements with our clients, and product ecosystem building can be broken down into 6 easily doable steps. The 6 steps towards product ecosystem building are identification of entities and the definition of those entities, value flow identification, ecosystem mapping and prioritization, de-risking the product, launching and learning, evolving and expanding. So ecosystem, we'll go through each one of those in detail. And the first one being entity identification and definition. It primarily focuses on the aspect of identifying all of the entities that surround or encapsulate the core product. Now, as part of entity identification, let us say if we were to take an example of an e-commerce product, if we are building an e-commerce product, some of the entities around those e-commerce product could be your supply chain providers, it could be your transportation providers, it could be your suppliers of packaging boxes, it could be your courier services that are local players that are available within the market. They could be extended set of service line providers that are enabling this product discovery to product delivery. Now, if we have to understand how each of these entities are listed around your core product offering, we can go through the steps that are listed in the right. So it says the whole process of entity identification and definition primarily focuses on understanding the core offering of the product and identifying the existing channels through which the product can be consumed. As part of that, we will need to list down digital and physical entities and then start defining their categorizations or how they sort of are placed within your core product offering. Now, once you've done that, list down the function of each of the entity in relation to the core offering. For example, if your core offering talks about product dispute, some of the entities around that could be your printing provider, who's probably able to take your invoice and provide a product description detail as part of the invoice that is being printed. Or it could be a payment provider who is able to quickly integrate and allow the customer to pay via credit card. Now, how are they correlated is something that we might need to, how closer are they to the core product offering and how far away are they to the core product offering is something that we might need to list out. Now, we need to keep expanding this list of entities based on the supplementary or complementary service offerings that they provide to the ecosystem. Now that we have done the entity identification and definition, when we move on to the next step, we need to talk about creation of the value flows. Identification of value flows is very critical for a couple of reasons. Generally, when we talk about building products, we talk about the customer journeys that need to be impacted. We talk about what would be the minimum viable product that we need to be building, timeline that we need to be building, etc. But what we often miss and why products probably at times fail pretty quickly is because we don't understand the value that we are communicating to the customer through the interactions that we are enabling through the digital products. We had wanted to take a bit of a flip on how we start creating these journeys. So once the entities have been identified and they've been placed around the core offering, we want to build what is called as value flows that happen between these entities. In service design, there's this concept of ecosystem mapping that talks about mapping what are the value exchanges between specific systems or specific products within the ecosystem. Here, we are also talking about one step earlier and abstracting it a bit higher, where we are talking about what is the value you want to communicate to your customer. Simple example being, if there is a food ordering app, and I think a lot of us have used this during the pandemic. The reason why probably customers keep going back to a specific food ordering app or maybe a few food ordering apps is not because they have better choice. That would be one of the aspects. They don't have, it's not just about better choice of restaurants. It's about the fact that when you place an order and when you do a payment, they're able to deliver it on time. Now, what they've done is they've created a trust or they're communicating the value of trust with you as a customer. And because of that, you're able to go ahead and continually place orders with them. So value flow identification in correlation to the product that you're building can be broken down into multiple ways. We've just stated a few examples here. One of the value flows can be called as trust. The other could be communication. So communication could be, how are you communicating with your customer? What is it that you want to put out to your customer? It could also be accountability value flow. It could be recommendation and advocacy. It could be a data value flow and monetary value flow, governance and enticement. These are some of the things that we are aware of, but there could be a lot more depending upon the type of product that you're building. For example, if you're building a security product, if it's a password manager, or if it is some kind of security vault where a lot of information needs to be stored, the value flow that you would pretty much want to immediately communicate to the customer could not be monetary in nature. It could be governance in nature. It could be trust in nature. So that will be very important for us to identify the value flows that we want to work with. What is the value that we want to communicate to the end customer? Once we have these value flows identified, once we have these entities listed around the core product offering, if you see this diagram basically represents that there is a core product, there are internal, external players, there are consumers, and maybe there are other players in the ecosystem that have been grouped and how they correlate to the core product. Because we've also defined value flows, ecosystem mapping and prioritization, which is the third step, talks about what is the value exchanges that happen between these entities. For example, if the core product is offering a particular capability, and that capability is delivered via a third-party provider to the consumer through the digital product, then there is a connection of value exchange between the core product and the third-party provider, and from the third-party provider back to the consumer. Now, the first could be governance, where the core product is interacting with the third-party provider. The second one, which is basically from the third-party provider to the consumer, could be trust-based. Now, the reason why we want to do this value exchange mapping is primarily to identify what is it that each stage of product ecosystem building or entity mapping is trying to communicate to the customer. Now, the very interesting part of this exercise is you are basically creating these strands of DNA that go between these entities. Now, creating these DNA strands primarily focus on ensuring that we are able to understand what is the ethos of the product, what is the DNA of the product, and how do we want to go about prioritizing which strand of the DNA to pick in order to deliver your product or service to the customer. The fourth step is primarily to ensure that we are able to de-risk the product. De-risking of the product primarily talks about faster experimentation and ensuring that we are able to take calculated risks before even we go about building the product. That talks about rapid prototyping, taking quicker bets to the market, and ensuring that before an investment is being made, we are able to verify whether the idea or the value exchanges that we have chosen is the right one. Simple example being, if you are building a product that is a security product, a digital security product, and you want to ensure that the customers are perceiving the value that you think needs to be delivered first. If you take a simple prototype and take it to the market and test it out and check their feedback, maybe that might not be the priority on their mind. They might communicate a completely different value, which means then you can now go back to the cutting board and then look at the DNA strand that you want to pick. It could not be trust, it could probably be communication. They might want to know that, when was the last time they reset the password, how many number of tokens they have before they go about purchasing more tokens, etc. So as part of de-risking the product, we need to be ensuring that we are taking calculated risks and thereby de-risking our investments. And through these rapid prototyping, we are able to litmus test the market or segment before we actually put money on active code. How do we go about de-risking the product? There are multiple ways to do it. I've listed some of the ones that we've used before. There's this tool called assumption mapping. Assumption mapping talks about calling out the fuzziest assumption and going about validating it. For example, if we are building a digital product for maybe a demographic of post 50 plus years for a specific market, one of the fuzziest assumptions is that this demographic will download the app and use it. Now, without validating this assumption, if you go about building your product, you might be in for a surprise when you launch the product if there's lower adoption or there is lower uptake. Assumption mapping allows for the stakeholders to put out their fuzziest assumption about the product or the doomsday assumption about the product and then go about validating it. This gives more clarity in terms of what bets you want to go after. The second one could be rapid prototyping, which is taking a small idea, creating rough, even if possible, paper mockups and testing it out with the market. One of the most effective ways to ensure that we are covering end-to-end customer life cycle could be JTBD charting or jobs to be done charting. Identifying the user jobs, what is the jobs that the user goes through to achieve a particular goal, and verifying if the product solves the need by doing the JTBD charting through study. With the data that has been collected, we could also do an end-to-end journey mapping chart that allows us to identify what would be the key leverage points in the journey. So let us say if we understand what the customers are looking for and we put out an end-to-end journey, there could be certain fulcrums that we might need to place in order for us to pivot the product quickly. So rather than, build feature A, does building feature B benefit the user? This is something that we can do through journey mapping. The most important part of de-risking the product is also understanding what would be the opportunity cost if we do not launch an idea. So identifying opportunity cost is to ensure that we are not missing out on a core chance of launching a particular functionality or a product capability on time will be very critical, because that would then determine which value flow to go after. Most importantly, and one of the fundamental principles that we need to align on is continuous and lean research planning. Now, research is generally considered as something that you do at the start of a program, gather the data, use that data, and then build something, then take it to market, find out there's something maybe not setting right, then come back and maybe do like a larger chunk of research. The most important point is to build continuous lean research plans that are focusing on micro user groups and that are more sustainable to do rather than cost intensive sessions. These research plans can be done through, virtual channels, and identifying these lean research methodologies would be very critical at the start of the program, and they can get refined. But what is very important is why you launch the product, after you've launched the product, post the product adoption, even while during the product growth phase, it will be important to keep doing this continuous lean research planning. I've shared some examples of what each of these methodologies look like. For assumption mapping, it's basically identifying what do we need to go after, what is the high risk and what is the unknown assumption that we need to investigate and get clarity on. Rapid prototyping, ensuring that we are able to go after the right set of bets. And the third one would be jobs to be done, where it's basically charting out what the customer will be doing at any given point in time and how do we identify key leverage points. Journey mapping, opportunity cost identification, and continuous research. These are easily available as frameworks on the internet, on Google. There are certain articles that you can research on ThoughtWorks websites. These methodologies can be applied in conjunction with what you're trying to solve or what problem you're going after. And they can be used in conjunction or as individual frameworks. The most important part of product building would be launching the product to market as quickly as possible, because the opportunity cost of delaying the product build, and most enterprises also go through this, right? Wanting to create the perfect idea, aligning with a large set of business units, getting leadership buy-in. Now, when we do all of this, the time to market for the product or the value to market for the product largely diminishes because the customers have moved on. Generative AI being a very simple area of thought that needs to be put in, where while we are thinking about something, there's already a tool out there that can think like a human. So how do we take a particular idea to market as quickly as possible is to identify the smallest component, market test it, understand whether the hypothesis will win or not, and then quickly go about building it, because we've done all the aspects of product building ahead of time as a precursor. So now is only about executing the whole thought process that has been validated with a market segment that you're going after. So launch and learn primarily focuses on identifying which is this particular functionality or product capability that you need to be building and what is it that you need to be going after. Quickly build it out and take it to the market and understand what is the outcome that you want to measure. It will be very important for us to understand the measures of success and the KPIs so that we are measuring the right set of parameters in the path to production. So launch and learn talks about sustained value creation by early launches, minimizing the time to market or value to market, and measuring what only matters and not going after metrics, vanity metrics like crazy. The final one is primarily about evolving and expanding. The two foundational pillars for any kind of product ecosystem or any product building would be continuous research and continuous discovery. We spoke about lean and micro research in the previous section, but continuous research is something that needs to be applied in order to understand the evolving customer needs, what would be the behavioral trends, what is the need in the market, and what is the competition doing differently, and how do we start adopting to it. If we break it down to foundational needs of the end consumer, we will be able to quickly adapt as long as you're able to feed into the insights from your user segment. Continuous discovery also talks about going back to the cutting board, ensuring that the North Star that has been identified for the product ecosystem and its effectiveness is still in place. If not, if there are changes to the business landscape, or maybe the usability landscape, or maybe there's a new tool or a new capability that is available in the market that potentially challenges your own North Star metric, how do we go back to the cutting board, and how do we start rebuilding some of those assumptions that we have made, and how do we sort of redefine our North Star metric for the product? A simple example that I've taken to demonstrate this 6 steps towards product ecosystem building is identifying the core offering. If we were to take a telco provider or telecom provider whose core offerings are postpaid and prepaid connection, or broadband services, or maybe OTT for all we know, largely focusing on rewards and loyalty. Imagine if they start building on top of data-driven insights, behavioral insights, etc., and start building an ecosystem that focuses on aspects like bringing utility payments as part of the app, focusing on health applications. So if you have wearables devices, if rather than having an app that is also needed to be installed for the wearable, if your telecom provider can quickly integrate with that wearable device and is able to follow a trend, is able to project a trend. What happens if telecom providers, being also 4G, 5G providers, broadband providers on the go, if they are able to provide education on the go? Now, this is an ever-expanding universe, right? So as part of this, you're able to bring in financial partners, you're able to create aspects of cashless economy if you're doing utility payments. You're also creating many moments for the customer where it helps them use a single app or use a single product to largely, wade through their day, or achieve multiple aspects of what they're supposed to be doing through a single product. And this doesn't mean that the core offering that the telecom provider is giving is moving away. With these core offerings, they're able to pivot, and they're able to use their core offerings as a strength and start building on top of that through additional partnership, bringing in additional ecosystem peripheral players who are able to leverage on the core offering that the telecom provider is giving. Some of the considerations that we need to be looking for when we are building product ecosystem is humanizing everything. Product ecosystems focus on primarily human-to-human connect. This is very, very different from platform thinking, where it is only API to API connect. The point of the ecosystem is to ensure that there is the whole concept of phygital approach to everything. The physical is blended into the digital. There is a positive approach that the positive impact that the ecosystem approach creates on the phygital nature of our lives accommodates aspects that generally get missed with product building. So generally, when we do product building, we are talking about product-to-product interactions, or we are only talking about capabilities. We are even talking about revenue realization of the product after launch to market. The ecosystem approach ensures that we are not missing out on these aspects by also looking at the phygital nature of things. The second one would be the value DNA strand. Now, largely we go after journeys that we think that the customer needs to be starting with, or we will be fulfilling for the customer. But the value DNA strand provides a completely different perspective, where it clearly qualifies what is the value that you want to communicate to your customer. It might not be revenue to start with. It might be the Revenue might be the second or third priority. It could mean trust, it could mean advocacy, it could mean a bunch of other things. So what do we need to go after also allows us to choose the right set of priorities to actually build. The most important thing is to also be able to go back to the cutting board and then start thinking in terms of first principles and understanding why we started building this product in the first place, whether the North Star metric that has been defined is actually aligning with the product vision, and is the product vision still true to what it started as, or should we need to change course or change direction? The last thing that we need to focus on is being mindful about metrics. Today, data is completely overused oil. And we are tracking pretty much everything, every move, every click, every navigation, etc. Now, there's a lot of information overload, but there's not meaningful insights that we are able to derive from that. So how do we be mindful about the metrics? What is the outcomes that we are chasing after? What are the customers are looking for? And how do we know what we are offering or what we are missing, and how do we pivot quickly on that is something that we need to be focusing on. These are considerations that we'll be taking for product ecosystem building. How do we apply ecosystem building in projects? If you are largely working in projects, and if you are not sure how to go about applying ecosystems, these are some of those areas that allows us to, quickly understand where product ecosystems can be applied or ecosystem thinking can be applied. If you're doing greenfield exploration, which is basically product building from scratch, the whole concept of product building, product ecosystem building, or creating that ecosystem empathy with greenfield exploration is very, very critical, because you're starting new and you're able to identify your players, you're able to identify your core offerings, and you can start fresh. The second area it can be applied to is brownfield understanding and expansion. This is when the product probably has hit a particular maturity, and the org is also finding it hard to understand what are the domains that we need to expand into. So ecosystem building also helps understand peripheral actors that can be tapped into, value flows that can be explored, and then thereby causing the flywheel effect of saying that these could be areas that can be explored. The third one being, we can use this for product assessments. Now, ecosystem mapping or ecosystem building primarily focuses on understanding how the product fits in the larger ecosystem context of peripheral players, service providers, supplementary and complementary service providers, people who are directly or indirectly influencing how your product gets perceived in the customer's viewpoint. So how do you evaluate your product or assess your product in relation to how these forces work is something that you can focus on. While we can use, the next one would be domain complexity deconstruction. This is very similar to event storming, but we are not going to be understanding the domain. Instead, we are going to be understanding how the complexity of the domain is, and how do we sort of create that interplay of the entity exchanges within the domain. Something as complex as, let us say, banking, or something as complex as e-commerce might need a bit more domain knowledge. And if you're exploring aspects, we can use ecosystem mapping to understand what are the value flow exchanges between the entities, who are the peripheral players, who are the core players, what are the core competencies that are required. And this gives us a better understanding of what that domain can look like. The next thing that can be used is for discovering MVP and outcomes and measure of success. Now, MVP is something that we spoke about as an outcome of ecosystem mapping or the value flow mapping. Now, once the MVP has been identified and we know what we are going after, it becomes very easy to identify the measures of success. It'll be the last aspect of ecosystem application projects could also be thought seeding and opportunity mining. So what if, the stakeholders are stuck with some idea, they are not able to move forward on a particular initiative. Now, planting the concept of ecosystem thinking would allow them to think beyond the existing boundaries that they are aware of. Maybe they've not thought about exploration of partnerships. They've not thought about, including certain actors that are currently servicing them indirectly, but could be brought into the ecosystem that might allow for end-to-end servicing of customer journeys. I'll take a quick pause here to see if there are any questions, any experiences that we want to share. I believe we have 15 more minutes, and then I'll share some examples of product ecosystems and then move to the third section.
Kandan, so far, no question or comments in the chat. So if you want, you can go directly to the end of the presentation, and there we're going to see again if there are any questions or comments that have been shared.
Sure. Okay. So as examples of product ecosystems, I wanted to share about Swiggy. I don't know how many of you have heard about Swiggy. Swiggy is a food delivery app in India. Swiggy primarily focused, it's a unicorn now, it's primarily focused on ensuring that it brought restaurants to your home. But if we were to apply this whole ecosystem play on Swiggy, right, it went beyond the core value prop of bringing restaurants to your home, and it started focusing on creating employment opportunity for, students, part-time, people who are looking for a secondary income, people who are looking for employment opportunities to become delivery agents who pick up food from the restaurant and drop it to your home. It also, through the process of doing this, it also enabled a very well-networked supply chain that it was quickly able to pivot. Its success rate expanded to such an extent that many of the OTT providers were pairing with Swiggy to start doing launches, videos, to an extent where, when one of the series was launched on Amazon Prime, the driver was given an icon of a dragon or something. So essentially, it also created a hook for multiple other, service providers who are not directly involved in the food and beverage business, but the periphery. So if we were to order food and eat it from home and watch a series, it sort of brought this whole end-to-end connection together. Swiggy went a bit further and said, how do we start building an opportunity for electrical vehicles in India and reduce the pollution, which also meant that they have partnered with one of the electric vehicle providers to convert their existing, driver base to start using EVs more. Instagram is something that is, it's well known across the world as an app that is allowed for sharing of photos and reels, etc. But in India, Instagram has largely grown into a quick homebrew business marketplace. A lot of businesses had challenges in terms of setting up their business, setting up sites, or the cost of ownership of an e-commerce application of sorts. But with the introduction of business accounts through Instagram, they're able to quickly connect with the customers for either a minimal cost or no cost at all, and they're able to create the network effects of being able to bring peripheral service providers like peer-to-peer pickup and drop partners, e-commerce providers, leveraging existing digital wallets for payments that has created a much bigger ecosystem of sorts. And these are not necessarily interconnected players as part of the Instagram offering. These are players that have been pulled in because Instagram has started offering this whole concept of a homebrew business marketplace as a capability within the product. The third area that I wanted to touch upon is how banks have been evolving over a period of time. Largely, when you were using credit cards maybe 2 decades ago, the whole experience of using a credit card at a POS terminal might have been very archaic. It could mean that the bank sort of controlled how you interacted at a POS terminal with your credit card. And if there was a decline or if there was a refund, it was all on the bank's terms. Now, banks are also pivoting quickly and saying, while you use your credit cards at the POS terminal, your experience at the POS terminal also becomes a lot better. And they reward you for using the credit cards. So basically what they're doing is they're increasing the customer's lifetime value with more spend by offering more, by bringing in e-commerce players, by bringing in service providers that are catering to peripheral needs of the customers at the comfort of their home. The other aspect that I wanted to talk about, and the final aspect for this presentation, is ecosystem caution. Ecosystem caution primarily is focusing on misconceptions and detours that we might have about product ecosystems. One of the biggest myth that I want to bust is that its product ecosystem is not a completely new concept. They've been in existence for a long time, much like our own ecology, our own ecosystem that we as humans thrive in. It's gotten a little more interest right now because we are more mindful about the current era of customer consciousness. Some misconceptions I would like to also break is product ecosystems and platforms are the same. It's quite the contrary. Platform thinking is definitely there as part of ecosystems, but ecosystems have more of a human touch point to them. Super app can be considered as a very integral part of ecosystem building, but building super app is what all product ecosystem is about, is also another misconception. Super app is one form of ecosystem building, and the type of business strategy might define what type of ecosystem that is being created in the process. Now, super apps are not the only format of ecosystem building. They are one form. The third one is offering more generally creates success for the product ecosystem. Now, the more we offer, the more it can be qualified as an ecosystem is a huge misconception because we want to sort of simplify. We want to bring this whole consciousness of the customer to the journey that they're doing. We want to provide a seamless pass-through for the customer for the kind of job that they need to complete. And being able to guide and guide the customer through their journey is what ecosystem focuses on, and not just offering them. Market share capture is what ecosystem is all about. One part of it is yes, it is one of the lenses that we need to apply, but ecosystems need to garner more of social capital and to have sustained impact and growth. This talks about ethical product building. It talks about local business promotion. It talks about how do we leverage, how does the product fit in the context of the geography of the particular region that it is operating under, and how many peripheral players is it taking along, how many local businesses is it able to support, and how is that interplay setting well for the region that they are operating in. Parting thoughts for the day. While everybody might be eager to apply the learnings and go back and start thinking about ecosystem in everything that we do, I would just suggest hold on a bit and think. Think from the lens of you as a consumer. What do you go through when you interact with products, your digital products? How does your call with the customer service representative impact your interactions with the product? What is your phygital nature of engagement with the product? Now, whatever product that you're building or services or a solution that you're building, apply such thought to product building. And let us start with ecosystem thinking even before we go about building ecosystems. There are 4 aspects that I wanted to leave you with as part of ecosystem building. Having awareness about physical touch points. It will be very important considering ecosystem focuses on phygital nature of product building. We also need to be aware of digital touchpoint continuity. What are the digital hops that are there, and what would be the continuity that we need to provide? Cohesion of experiences is basically allowing the customer to glide through the overall end-to-end journey, even if it is only to a specific area of what they want to complete. How is the cohesion of experience for them? And most importantly, consistent customer love at all points in time. Thank you. Thank you for your time today. And that's the end of the presentation.
Thank you very much, Kandan. So at the moment, we don't have any written question in the Q&A answer form. Let's just take 10 seconds to see if any of the attendants have a last-minute question. Otherwise, selfishly, I have one for you, Kandan, but I'll refrain so that I'm going to ask this as the last one. All right, I'm going to ask it then again. If there are any last questions, please just write it down. And also, Ronnie, if you have anything, go for it. So my question for you, so first of all, Kandan, thank you very much. It was super interesting. And my question for you is, do you see any scenarios in which the evolution towards a product ecosystem might put the original company in jeopardy. Let me explain this better. I never work on product ecosystem, so it might be a naive question, but anyway, my concern is that let's assume the two of us start a company, then we reach product market fit, then we evolve into a product ecosystem, but one of our partners becomes so much powerful and so much revenue is generated by them, then we risk kind of reverse the power dynamics, or we risk even to lose our company. Is this possible, or is something that doesn't happen naturally in the product ecosystem? It's just a fantasy of mine.
I think monopolies are going to exist no matter what. I am sure there are a lot of economic and power play involved in creating such monopolies, and product ecosystems generally are not a silver bullet for any of these situations. But if we were to talk about what is the product solving and how is that product solving that particular problem for the set of customers, and where is the monopoly, diverting the attention of customers back to them, I think it will be easier when we build a product ecosystem. It will be easier to quickly use value flows to identify, okay, maybe the monopoly is redirecting the customer with monetary benefits, better discounts. But is the customer actually looking for better discounts, or are they looking for better quality of products? So what is the pivot that we need to take? I think through ecosystem building or ecosystem mapping, we are able to identify the kind of pivot that we are needing to take, rather than having to follow what the competition is defining as the trend.
Thank you very much, Kandan. Super insightful.
Sure.
All right. I see there are no other questions. So again, thank you very much, Kandan. And just to wrap up, as usual, in a couple of days, we're going to send out the recording and the deck. And I just wanted to thank you again for joining us today. And I think see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.